Okay, we are going to get started. So, hi everyone. Welcome to Canadian Immigration Options for US H-1B visa holders. Today's session is aimed to provide you with useful Canadian immigration options designed for international founders, aspiring entrepreneurs, high-skilled workers who are all currently in the US as H-1B visa holders. The session is going to be led today by Pavan, Dhillon, and Ray Walia. Pavan Dhillon is the principal attorney of Dhillon Immigration Law. It is a law firm based in San Francisco. As one of a handful of licensed Canadian immigration attorneys in the US, Pavan has developed unique expertise crafting successful cross-border immigration strategies for foreign nationals based in the US. Recognized by Who's Who Legal in 2020 as global leader in corporate immigration, Pavan works extensively with companies of all sizes, from startups to Fortune 500 companies, as they launch or expand into Canada. Ray Walia is a serial entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience in both the entertainment and technology sectors. Ray founded Launch Ventures, which owns and operates a network of private incubators, innovation labs, and investment funds. The most prominent incubator is Launch. Launch is Western Canada's leading entrepreneurship facility that has incubated more than 3,500 entrepreneurs, of which 300 have grown their startups to seed and Series A stage, raised over $500 million in funding. Launch is a designated provider for the Canadian Startup Visa Program and a referral partner for the Canadian Global Talent Stream Program. After today's presentations, we're going to have an open Q&A portion for the last 10 or 15 minutes. So please keep all of your questions for that time period. We'll be taking all questions throughout using the small Q&A button at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So please put all your questions there at any time. So Pavan, we will start the session with you today. Take it, Pavan.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I'm just making sure that you can still see my screen. I'm just going to focus on that. Can you see it okay?
Yeah.
We're good? Okay, perfect. So thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to just start by focusing on why this presentation came to be. And essentially, this is because we've had a number of requests to discuss Canadian immigration options. And this is really predominantly coming from a lot of individuals who are on H-1B or other high-skilled workers who are in the United States. So we've teamed up today with Launch Academy to present this timely webinar as a free and informative overview of the main tools in the Canadian immigration toolbox for those who are outside Canada seeking to move to Canada permanently and reside there. Just a reminder that we will not be providing legal advice during this webinar, but are providing information only. So if you have questions about your specific situation, we would recommend booking a consultation with the Canadian immigration attorney. So it's no secret that politics has really dominated immigration policy in the United States. And in addition to the Trump era protectionist policies, which will hopefully be dismantled by the Biden administration come January, many foreign nationals in the US, especially those born in populous countries like India or China, are facing longer term hurdles to obtain permanent residence. For instance, on November 20th, the Cato Institute also just released a study that focused on over 100,000 children facing family separation as a result of the employment-based green card backlog. Conversely, Canada has been much more aggressive in recruiting high-skilled global talent as a way to really attract global talent and support its aging population, as well as fueling innovation. The immigration minister, Marco Mendicino, came out recently to state that immigration will be a key part of Canada's post-COVID-19 recovery plan. Despite logistical challenges that we faced during COVID-19 that have really plagued immigration processes across the world, Canada recently announced it will accept over 1.2 million immigrants over the next 3 years and has rolled out initiatives for faster processing and more pathways for permanent residence. I'm going to take a moment to just plug Canada for a moment. I'm a Canadian as well, but it does consistently rank well in terms of being one of the countries with the highest standard of living, and this really comes down to universal health care, excellent public schools, and a number of pro-immigration policies. For instance, spouses of most high-skilled workers can work on a non-employer specific work permit. All work permits are dual intent. And on top of it, Canada does not have per country limits. And so we sidestep the lengthy processing that plagues the green card process in the United States. For processing times, we are not sure really at this point of what the impact of COVID-19 will be just yet, but we confirm that these cases are being processed. And before COVID, we were looking at for either the express entry process or the startup visa that we're going to discuss today, about 6 to 12 months, regardless of where you were born. After one becomes a permanent resident, they will qualify for citizenship in 3 to 5 years of physical presence. And at that point, you would be carrying one of the most valuable passports in the world. So essentially, today, I want you to walk away from this presentation and know that Canada is open for business, and Canada wants the best and brightest to come to Canada and stay. So there's this real push towards retention of these high-skilled workers that Canada is planning to bring in. So what is express entry? Express entry is Canada's merit-based permanent residence process. It's a points-based system. A points assessment is conducted based on the applicant's age, education, language abilities, work experience, and adaptability factors to determine who is the best applicant to be a permanent resident in Canada. If you qualify, it is one of the few programs in the world where it is possible to become a permanent resident in less than a year without first needing a job offer or having other strong ties to the country, regardless of where you were born. But it's not as easy as just calculating points. It's best to think of express entry instead of as a case management process. Candidates are going to be ranked against one another for permanent residence, for those candidates who are applying for permanent residence at the same time. So what that means is that they will all enter this pool of applicants, and only once you are in that pool are you eligible to receive an invitation to apply for permanent residence from the government. Up until that point, you are merely expressing an interest in becoming a Canadian permanent resident. So what are some of the prerequisites? You must complete an approved language exam. You must complete your educational credential assessment, and you must fall under one of the you must qualify for one of the underlying programs for permanent residence. You'll see on the screen a number of designated providers for either of the first two requirements. Because most of our audience is based in the United States, we're going to be focusing on the Federal Skilled Worker Program, and this is Canada's high skill. It's the program that is for high skilled immigrants who have completed less than 1 year of full-time Canadian work experience. It is another points-based system. So this time again, we're assessing age, education, language abilities, work experience, and adaptability. However, the scoring system attributes different values to each of these and is very different than the comprehensive ranking system used for express entry. So the threshold score here is 67 out of 100 points. It's static. In addition, you'll need to meet some minimum requirements. You'll need to live outside of Quebec. You have to have high school education or higher that's supported by an ECA. You need work experience in the last 10 years, and this must include a minimum of 1 year of full-time continuous paid work experience in the occupation listed as the primary occupation. Now, this is really important because a lot of individuals will miss out on this requirement. And so that is really key because you have to be able to prove that. The other requirement is that for language, you need to have at least something that's called a Canada Language Benchmark of 7, which is an IELTS 6 in each of the abilities, or a CELPIP 7 in each of the abilities. There is also, it's also important to note that, and these are some of the things that we see when individuals have tried to apply on their own and have not been successful. What we see are difficulty in proving their work experience or not meeting the requirements of the document that's needed to support that, or we see that they are unable to prove that they have enough settlement funds. And those funds are the minimum funds that a high skilled immigrant should have when they enter Canada in order to be economically self sufficient upon arrival. This requirement, of course, is necessary because you aren't going to be, there is not this requirement of having a job offer. And so if you don't have a job offer, then you need to have the proof of funds. So let's say you meet the above prerequisites and you've completed the language test and you've obtained the ECA and now you meet the minimum requirements. If that's at that point that we would create the profile and begin the process for express entry. I'm just going to go back to this slide. Oops. Right here. And so an Immigration and Citizenship Canada will determine your rank in the pool of candidates using a comprehensive ranking score, system score. And your CRS score is based on various factors. It includes your age, your education, your work experience, your language skills, and your adaptability, again. And there is no minimum score required to enter the pool. And you can remain in the pool for up to 12 months. And this is a slide that breaks down how the comprehensive ranking system score is divided up. It's out of 1,200. And this is a calculation that we would do as well. So after you've calculated your score, you'll every 2 to 3 weeks, and you're already in the pool of applicants, every 2 to 3 weeks, IRCC will conduct an express entry draw to announce the threshold score. Now, this is really important because as the Federal Skilled Worker Program was static, this one is varying. So that draw is really key because that threshold score is announced every 2 to 3 weeks. That means it changes. And the threshold score depends on a number of people in the pool, your relative CRS score compared to the others in the pool, and the number of invitations the government decides to issue. There's an inherent uncertainty in the process because the score changes every 2 to 3 weeks. We will base our assessment of the chances of success really through trends analysis, as well as advice regarding how to increase your score. Those individuals that are above the threshold score will receive an invitation to apply. It's at that point that you submit the documentation that substantiates everything that you put in the profile to begin with. So you usually would have 60 days to submit the documents, but currently due to COVID, the government has provided 90 days. Understanding that some documents are more difficult to obtain when a number of government facilities are shut down. So it's only really at this stage that you start submitting the documentation. Up until this point, it's really more of an analysis that, and confirmation of qualification. So the government really aims to process these applications in 6 to 8 months and has been successful in doing so. And in our office, we've received many applications, especially pre-COVID, in about 4 months. So it's a lightning fast process. And it's really important to seek out advice about the documentation in advance because this is where a number of hurdles are met by applicants and their inability to properly obtain the necessary documents for this program. So one thing I would mention is that IRCC is really strict about the documents. And so if you don't meet them, they'll reject your application. So one of the questions we usually have, and this is the one that we get the most, is what are my chances of success? And so you can see, based on the fact that we're dealing with 2 different points assessments, there is and on top of it, the variable score that's required. There's a lot of uncertainty and we can't really give you a yes, you qualify and you should submit the application oftentimes it requires some advice about how to qualify and when to submit the application, what documentation you should have ready when you create the profile to begin with. So, for instance, the government at the end of the day has a lot of control over how many invitations are issued. So most of this year, the number of invitations issued has been fairly consistent and hovered around 3,700. Um, but then most recently, the number of invitations jumped up to 5,000. And the reason for that is because the government introduced the new immigration levels plan and committed again to increasing the number of um, immigrants to 1.2 million over the next 3 years. So they're really pushing the express entry program because that's the one that most immigrants apply under. So to give you an idea, the lowest score that we've ever had is 415. And that was in 2017. Recently, we've seen significantly more interest in this program, and it's really pushed the number of applicants up. And so now we have over 147, almost 147,000 applicants in the pool. But you'll see that many of them are under 450. And then this is where we see most of the activity in terms of where invitations are ultimately issued. So when we are looking at the chances of success, it's really important to understand how express entry works. And hopefully this will give you a little bit of an idea of what your chances are if you were to do one of your own online self-assessment tools that are readily available. Because we are often asked what the chances are, and the realization that maybe the score is not as high, where the next question we always get is, how can I increase my score? So we wanted to provide you with some insight here. One of the most common and effective ways is really to increase your language scores. Language is given a lot of weight under the Express Entry program and a lot of CRS points. And in fact, the Canadian government recently just announced that the French language abilities would be given even more points. So your second language or the French language skills in particular would be awarded with more points. So it's if you have any proficiency for languages and you're not meeting that threshold score, it's worth considering French as an option. The next one is completing a Canadian educational credential. So if you've completed a post-secondary education credential in Canada from a designated learning institution, you will obtain additional points as well. So during full-time studies, certain students can also work off campus without a work permit. And they can work up to 20 hours per week during the school year and 40 full-time during regularly scheduled breaks between academic sessions. Also note that and I think this is really key, is that you have the educational credential, you get the additional points, but after you've gotten that educational credential, you're also eligible for a postgraduate work permit. And the duration of that work permit is really dictated by the length of your program. So if the program of study is between 8 months to 2 years, you get a postgraduate work permit that's issued for the same duration. If the program of study is 2 years or longer, the postgraduate work permit will be issued for 3 years. And that's for any type of program, educational program. So Canadian high skilled workers experience, Canadian high skilled work experience pursuant to that postgraduate work permit will allow you to obtain further points because you'll have obtained Canadian work experience. And that's also given a lot of weight. There are immigration programs that are also operated by provinces. And these provinces will issue a nomination certificate, which will support your ability to apply for permanent residence at the federal level. It's only the federal government that in the end can grant permanent residence. The PNPs, as they're known, provincial nominee programs, there's over 80 of them, and some are tied to the express entry process and others are not. So to be eligible to get an additional whopping 600 points, you need to be able to qualify and look at the individual provinces and their programs, and the ones that are specifically tied to express entry. A number of different provinces will traditionally offer options even if you don't have a job offer. So it's important to look out for those ones in particular. For instance, Ontario has a very popular program that's the Human Capital Priorities, and they have tech draws and they have non-tech draws as well. So that's one that is usually a popular option once an individual is in the pool. So if you have a job offer in a particular province, that greatly increases your chances of success under the PNP programs. And job offers are of a real benefit in that sense, because they can be tied to a province, and that province may then allocate additional points to you and assess you to be somebody that they would like in their province. And so that's one part of it. The second is that some job offer points some job offers will provide you with additional points. Now, not all job offers are created equal. You must receive what we consider a qualifying job offer, and often this will require you to be working in a position with an employer-specific work permit in Canada. So a qualifying job offer can yield an additional 50 points for non-executive positions, or up to 200 points if you're looking at executive positions. And those are, for those who are aware of the National Occupation Classification, those are coded as 00s. So once approved for an employer-specific work permit, an eligible Canadian employer can also make a job offer that must be valid for at least 1 year from the date you become a permanent resident. And if you have a labor market impact assessment, even without that Canadian experience, you can also be eligible for 50 points out of 200. And so the ones that aren't tied to the labor market impact assessment, they require you to have Canadian work experience. And then the ones that aren't tied or that are part of the labor market impact assessment based work permits, those ones are the ones that you can obtain those additional points immediately, as long as you have a job offer from that same Canadian employer that's going to give you a job offer after you become a permanent resident. So those are the main ways to increase your score. One of the things that I did want to touch upon, because the job offer is a real draw for many of you, and some of you don't have enough points without that job offer, one of the programs that I really wanted to touch on is the Global Talent Stream. And before I get into that, I wanted to just give you a brief overview of how Canadian work permits operate in Canada and how they function. So Canada doesn't have this alphabet soup of work permit categories. Instead, we have two major groupings for work permits. One being the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, and those are the ones that are tied to the LMIAs. And the other is the International Mobility Program. The International Mobility Program allows companies to apply without testing the Canadian labor market, and that's because they're deemed to be a positive benefit to the labor market. These work permits are very similar to the ones that you see in the United States. So you have the TN visa for those who are coming in under a free trade agreement, such as NAFTA or the USMCA. You have intercompany transfers, so that's similar to the L1 visa, and then you have significant benefit work permits, which I would say is most similar to the O1 visa in the United States for extraordinary ability. These work permits are much faster and less onerous on an employer. And our office, we usually look to these first because of the fact that they're less onerous. So we always check and start with the IMP analysis to begin with. But one of the things just to remember is if you would get a NAFTA work permit or a free trade agreement work permit or an intercompany transfer or one equivalent, these ones are the ones that you need to have that 1 year of Canadian work experience with that work permit in order to get those additional points. The Temporary Foreign Worker Program is LMIA based. That's a labor market impact assessment based work permit. These require a test of the Canadian labor market or require an employer to make some specific commitments to the government in order to have a positive impact on the labor market. So there are a few streams under the LMIA process, but we'll really be focusing on the global talent stream. And because it's the faster track. Now, global skills strategy in general is a fast track program. I'm not going to spend too much time on this part of it, just being mindful of time. But what I wanted to just emphasize is that prior to the global talent stream, which began in June 2017, for instance, if you were an Indian software engineer, it would take several months for you to become to come in as a worker under the labor, because the labor market impact assessment was taking several months. And then on top of it, the work permit application process was applied for online through a consulate because you need the visa stamp, and that was taking an additional several months. So sometimes we were looking at 6 to 8 months to just get an Indian software engineer into Canada. So the global skills strategy, the benefit of it is really that you now are eligible for, at the consulate, 2-week processing service standard. And the global talent stream also was a 10-day labor market impact assessment process. And it's been wildly successful and very, very popular. So I want to just spend a few minutes to talk about the global talent stream because it is a popular category. Now, there's two parts of the global talent stream. One is category A and the other is category B. Category A it requires a referral partner. So this would include Launch Academy, for instance, and then also some of the provincial governments or the federal government. And these are really geared towards high growth companies seeking global talent, and you need to show genuine operations in Canada, a focus on innovation, a focus on scaling up, but most importantly is that referral from a designated partner. The category B is also here's a list actually of the referral partners as well. But category B is the one that has a global talent list. And these ones are really focused on tech professions. It's a fast track for tech professions. So 10 days, 10 business days. And even during COVID, it's been pretty impressive. It's about 10 business days. There's no minimum recruitment. You do need to meet a prevailing wage. The key really is the labor market benefits plan. And that's, instead of recruitment, your employer needs to provide significant evidence that they're going to benefit that hiring you will benefit the Canadian labor market. So it's a 2-step process to obtain the work permit, but these are some of the categories, some of the occupations that are listed. The LMIA is really the employer's application, and once you have that positive labor market impact assessment, it's only at that stage that you can apply for your work permit. So Express Entry is a great program. If you qualify, you have enough points. If you don't, then you might need to leverage one of these other categories for a work permit or to increase your language scores. But there are a lot of other pathways that may be a good option, but I think one of my favorites is really the startup visa, and I'll pass it over to Ray so he can provide you with information about that, and we can
awesome.
you can learn about the requirements as well.
Why don't we maybe answer a few of these questions first, because some of them seem to be more relevant to Express Entry. Is why B1, B2 visa, which we refer to as US H-1B, are they the same thing or is that different?
No, that's different. And then on top of it, I mean, I'm not a US immigration attorney, so I can't provide any US immigration advice. But in the end, the reason we're focusing on H-1Bs is primarily because of the high skilled work experience that the individual has. So we file these applications from individuals all over the world, not necessarily just the United States. So that whether you have an H-1B or not is not a qualifying factor.
Okay. The next one is if my score is just less than 4 or 6 points, then the cutoff, for example, will I not receive the ITA, even though there's not enough people in the pool?
That's a question we receive quite a bit, and it's always it's when you're so close, the thing that I would say is try as much as possible, if you can, and if you have any wiggle room to increase your language score, try to do so, because you'd be surprised how much of a benefit that can have. But ultimately, what you're really looking at is that one slide that I showed about the number of people who are in the pool and the number of invitations that are being issued. So if right now you're at 4 to 6 points off the cutoff, the good news is that Canada is now really focusing on issuing more invitations. So it jumped up from 38, 3,900 in the beginning during for most of this year, and just most recently went up to 4,500 and now to 5,000. So the chances, so what that means is that the number of people that are in that higher part of the graph that I showed, that those individuals, so your chances are going to improve, I think. So be patient, but otherwise, one of the 4 options that we discussed on how to increase your score, it doesn't really make a difference if you have, 4 points less or you have 50 less. Ultimately, you need to meet that cutoff.
Try to whip through some of these, and then we'll jump into start a visa, because I know there's a lot of people on this call that are interested to start a visa. But if I've done my master's in the US, do I need a WES evaluation?
Yes, you do.
Your master, but yes, you do. And then how current do the reference letters need to be?
I always try to have them fairly current, just to make sure that the IRCC has the contact information that's the most current. But ultimately, I've never submitted a reference letter that didn't need to be tweaked at least a little bit. So ultimately, I've never submitted one that's not recent, because you need to make sure it meets specific requirements.
And this will be the last one, and then we'll get to the rest after start a visa. But if you've incorporated in Canada and have a very profitable Shopify business, can the company you incorporated offer you a job, and would that count? I'm guessing this is for Express
I
Entry or
think,
Global Talent Stream.
yeah, I think it could potentially, and I think that's more of a question that's really specific to an individual. So I would encourage you to reach out and have a consultation.
Okay. All right, and then yeah, there's obviously more flowing in now that people see we're taking questions, but keep your questions coming in. We'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of this, but we will jump over to the startup visa portion now as well. And you are going to receive a follow-up email from us. And so once you do receive that follow-up email, feel free to reach out to either myself or Pavan, and we're happy to answer your questions offline as well. And then, as Pavan indicated, definitely is a good idea if you have more personal nature questions, have a consultation with her directly. All right, now, so just to give you a little intro, I've lost my screen here. Sorry. Is my screen shared? Everybody can see that? Sorry, I'm just going to do a stop share for a second here. All right. So just a little bit of background about me, as Alana kind of introed. We are, sorry, Pavan, if I can just get you to mute yourself.
Sorry.
Yeah, clicking away on your keyboard there. So Launch Ventures is the umbrella company. So under Launch, we own and operate a network of incubators, innovation studios, investment funds, and we do large scale events around North America. So just give you a quick high level overview on the corner here. You've got Traction. So Traction is our signature event. Obviously with COVID, we are not doing any in-person events, but we do a lot of online webinars. When things do get back to normal, we do CEO dinners, CXO dinners in Vancouver, Seattle, San Francisco, New York, Toronto. And then our signature event is our Traction conference once a year. Traction being probably the most important thing to any entrepreneur and startup is how do you acquire customers, how do you retain them, and how do you monetize them. So we've got a whole slew of content around that and very deep integrations into Silicon Valley and the Bay Area. So as much as we're talking about come and move to Canada, Launch and our network is all about building great tech companies, building great global businesses. We have an investment fund called Victory Square. The latest success is Victory Square acquired a company out of Brazil We have production in Brazil, and we're producing a safe test for COVID. Millions of production a month all over the world, distributed out of Brazil and the US. Fans Unite is another company that we spun out, just went public, and they just listed on the US exchange, and they're focusing on building esports and sports betting platforms and transparency around the world. Sports Tech is another one of my companies. We're doing sports and entertainment, logistics, data, content, contracts, all back office for sports, primarily in Europe and Asia. And so we have a very global perspective on the type of companies that we want to work with and type of entrepreneurs that we want to work with. Shenzhen Technology University, so we've got some deep integrations into the university circuit in China as well. And VR, AR is a big part of what we're focusing on as well. So this presentation that we're talking about, Startup Visa, is all about Canadian business incubation and business immigration. I really emphasize the incubation side of things because we are not an immigration firm. We are a business incubator. Immigration is a byproduct of our programs, a very important byproduct, but it is a byproduct. The main focus for us is to help entrepreneurs build great global businesses. And so this portion of the presentation is really focused on the entrepreneurs, primarily co-founders that are sitting in CEO or executive roles. Global Talents Team, Express Entry are also features of our program. So Startup Visa is probably the most preferred because it's the most powerful, but we do have avenues for our companies to work with a Global Talent Stream and also Express Entry. So just give you a little background about Launch. So Launch started in 2012. As I talked about Launch Ventures, Launch Academy is the nonprofit arm of Launch Ventures. And so at Launch Academy, we don't take equity in the companies that we work with. We've helped over 3,500 entrepreneurs over the last 8 years. These numbers are actually old. Our companies, probably at the end of this year, have raised well over $600 million and created thousands of jobs. Traction Conference is a big signature event. It is really well recognized in the Bay Area. We have tech leaders from billion-dollar companies on our stage, CTO of Reddit, Chris Lowe, VCs from all the major funds come and talk on our stage and connect with our audience members in our network. And then we do also have a private, more intimate events called our CXO events that I alluded to. And these are in key markets around the North American sector. The other thing to really emphasize here is we're based in Vancouver. We're on the West Coast, which is known as the Cascadia Innovation Corridor. And that's kind of linkages between Vancouver, Seattle, Portland. The Cascadia Initiative is an initiative between the governments in these states and province, but also universities, but more importantly, tech companies. I think Amazon has a big presence. Microsoft has a big presence. Nike, Boeing, AT&T. It's really trying to focus on galvanizing key technology stacks, blockchain, quantum computing, and VR, AR being the prominent ones in this region. The other key thing about Canada and Vancouver is a lot of people don't necessarily equate Canada to innovation, but that's far from the case. Canada has had a long history of innovation and technology. The Innovation Supercluster Program is a government initiative where the Canadian government has put over $1 billion into focusing on creating superclusters across the country. Superclusters being a high concentration of a specific subject matter in a region that not only brings in the tech companies that are building the tech, but also multinationals, large corporations, universities, other companies to really create a supercluster of innovation in a specific sector. And quickly tell you the 5 superclusters that are across Canada. From the Atlantic provinces, you have marine sciences, aquatic sciences. In Quebec and Montreal, it's the AI supercluster. In Ontario and Toronto, it is the manufacturing and IoT supercluster. In Saskatchewan and the Prairie provinces, it is the alternative protein, plant-based science, agriculture supercluster. And then here on the West Coast in Vancouver, it is the digital supercluster. And the way I like to phrase the digital supercluster, it's all about how do you acquire data, how do you analyze that data, and then more importantly, then how do you visualize it for execution. But let's not beat around the bush. Canada is a smaller market, but it is a great gateway to growth around the world. And it's a great headquarters to position your business, especially for international entrepreneurs. Setting yourself up in Canada gives you easy access into the North American market. We have the North American Free Trade Agreement between Canada, US, Mexico. But even under that, we have Mexican companies, Mexican entrepreneurs that want to set up operations in Canada because it's easier for them to do business in the US as a Canadian company than it is a Mexican company. And that's with the North American Free Trade Agreement. Now, when you add in the layers of, okay, if you're a Nigerian company, if you're an Iranian company, there's absolutely huge hurdles, even with Biden coming in with you doing business in the North America market because of these immigration restrictions and challenges that have been put up, tariffs and whatnot. If you're a company from India, if you're a company from Vietnam, it does get a little bit easier, but still there are major challenges, and immigration being one of the biggest ones. But one of the silver linings, I guess, if you can call it anything, from COVID is a deeper understanding that you don't actually have to be headquartered in San Francisco to connect with customers, investors, channel partners, or other strategic stakeholders. Now, don't get me wrong. I do feel that San Francisco and the Bay Area has a very strong tie to tech companies, as you can tell with Traction and everything else that we do. A lot of it revolves around that nucleus, but you can be far more strategic about how you do business, how you reduce your overhead, but also how do you give yourself stability in your business. And that's where our Maple program comes in. So Maple is really about building a strong foundation for your business as you scale and grow it. We do have two programs that we're focusing on, Maple and Liberty. Up until now, we have 12 cohorts, over 85 companies have participated, 45 companies have landed, but over 5,000 applications processed. And you can see do the math, 85 companies out of 5,000. So we do have a high bar of who we like to work with because, again, we are a business incubation program. We want to make sure we're helping the entrepreneurs that we feel we can give the most support to and give the best advantage to. Startup Visa is a great portion of it. It's a great byproduct. But again, we go back to how do we help entrepreneurs be successful, and we try to select the ones that we feel we can help the most. And again, going back that fact that we're a nonprofit, we don't take equity. So this is not about us trying to see which companies we can get to $1 billion valuation. It really is about the individuals. Who are the entrepreneurs that we feel will have the biggest impact in Canada? We'll get into this a little later on, but under the Startup Visa, there is no ties to your company's performance. So if your company does fail, that's still an acceptable outcome. But for us, if that does happen, we want to make sure that people that we're working with are actually going to be a net positive, net benefit to the ecosystem, so that if their company does fail, they're not going to turn around and go become a barista at Starbucks. They're actually going to build another AI company, or they're going to join a VR, AR company and help transform another business into a success. And I forgot why this slide's here. So this is kind of just emphasizing that a lot of the multinationals do have operations in Vancouver. And so when I talk about the bridge to San Francisco, us being based in Vancouver, we do a lot of work with the multinationals that have operations in Vancouver. Microsoft, Boeing, Amazon is actually HQ2. If anybody's heard of HQ2, that by default has always been Vancouver. And with everything that's been happening in the world, we just see Amazon doubling down more on Vancouver. And and this is going back to the immigration program. So global talent stream and other things. One of the reasons why they're setting up operations here is because of the favorable immigration programs in Canada. And it's not just the big companies. Over 100 Bay Area companies have set up offices in Vancouver in the last year because of immigration, because of access to the global talent stream, because of the other opportunities. We're in the same time zone. We're very similar in terms of culture and geographics and demographics as the Bay Area, but also just the deep, rich tech industry here makes it easy for them to choose Vancouver as an option for them to set up their operations. And a big part of it is immigration, as I talk to you as entrepreneurs, people that are looking to build your business, a lot of people know how challenging it is to be rushing through an airport, trying to get to a conference or trying to get to a city for a big sales meeting or whatnot. Any type of delays in immigration are very detrimental. But that's only one side of it. And we're kind of deviating away from startup visa here, but this really starts to play into why you want to set up operations in Canada. As a tech company, talent is at a premium. You need to find talent from around the world. And that's why we've set up the Global Talent Stream program, is that our Canadian companies can easily access talent around the world and get them positioned here. Because even if you are an H-1B or an engineer that's on a temporary visa or whatnot, the fact that your job doesn't require you to do a lot of traveling does not mean that you do not have immigration worries in your mind. Even though you may be stationary, the thoughts of having to go back home to visit your family or deal with a family emergency or whatnot, and the fear that if I do leave, would I be let back into the country, has negative impacts on your productivity. And that then obviously affects the productivity of the company. And so setting up operations in Canada and knowing that you're able to build a stable workforce that doesn't have those type of fears and challenges bodes really, really well for the performance of your business. And this is why when we talk about our Maple program being global expansion, a lot of our companies that have worked with us to date have been companies that already have a product in market. They're already building their business. They want to expand to North America. They know that Canada has all these favorable immigration programs, not just for them under startup visa, but for the workforce that they want to build for scaling their company to that next level. That's why they're looking at it, especially when you look at companies from the Bay Area already doing it. Well, if they're doing it, why can't my company from India do it? Why can't my company from Vietnam do it? And I think Pavan might have touched on this a little bit, but there definitely is a very different sentiment and treatment of family members and team members between US policies and Canadian policies. And these were there even before Trump came in. These are some of the challenges that the US immigration system has as a whole. And they will be challenges even after Biden comes in and starts making his changes. These are some of the legacy systems and legacy issues that will always be there. We won't dive into these, but this presentation will be shared afterwards as well. So we're going to quickly dive into the startup visa and try to wrap up just under the hour, and we'll take some more questions. So the startup visa program is really focused on international entrepreneurs that have the ability and the skills to build a business in Canada. That businesses are innovative. They don't necessarily have to be deep technology, but there should be some level of innovation and technology attributed to it. But more importantly, creating jobs in Canada, building a business in Canada, and able to compete on a global scale. So not for somebody that wants to build a retail store or a farm or anything like that. It's more about building global businesses. A little bit of history of the startup visa. It was actually designed at Launch Academy in 2012. The founders of Grow Lab, which is accelerator here, they came up with the concept and introduced it to the Canadian government to make it a federal program. So it was piloted in 2013, but it became a permanent program in 2018. And so what that tells you is that the program is not going away. If it does have to go through any changes, it has to go through a lot of legislative process to be changed. And so that gives you stability and knowing that this program is going to be here for a while, and it is a very viable, sustainable option. But the key here is that there is a notion of active management in Canada. This is not meant to be a shortcut immigration path. This is a business incubation or business immigration program. This is about building great businesses in Canada, helping great entrepreneurs be global entrepreneurs with a foundation in Canada. And so there has to be a desire and motivation to build an active business, active management of the business in Canada. Some of the key features is it's up to 5 founders plus spouses and children. So the startup visa program, one of the reasons why it's the most popular in the world is because of the depth it has. It's up to 5 co-founders, plus your spouses, plus your children will all get priority access to work visas and student visas. And typically a turnaround time was 4 to 8 weeks. It's obviously a lot longer right now because of COVID, but historically, we've been able to see our companies, once they've completed all the paperwork, submitted it, it usually is a turnaround of 4 to 8 weeks to receive your work permits. And then once you apply for your permanent residency, it usually is a 12-month turnaround time. And again, 5 founders plus spouses plus children all get priority access to permanent residency. Now, if your company only has 2 founders, that's fine. There's no minimums, there is a maximum. One of the other great things about the startup visa program is there is no age limit. With the express entry, there are some penalizations if you're over 35. With startup visa, we have entrepreneurs that are in their 60s, 20s, 30s, all over the map. It doesn't matter. It's all about your business and whether or not the designated entity, Launch Academy in this case, feels that you have the ability to build a successful business in Canada. And so in order to qualify for startup visa, you'd need the support of a designated entity, designated organization. There are 3 paths. There is a venture funds. So any venture fund that is willing to put a $200,000 investment into your company that is designated under startup visa can issue you a letter of support. Same thing with angel investors. The investment threshold is lower. It's at 70,000. But as long as they want to back your company and they're designated by the Canadian government, they can issue a support letter as well. In the terms of incubators and accelerators, there is no specified investment letter, but there is a requirement to participate in one of their approved programs. In case of Launch Academy, it is our Maple program and Liberty program. We do not make investments. We do charge service fees for our programs, but as a nonprofit, we try to keep those fees as low as possible, which we'll get into. But there are other groups and organizations across Canada that have different structures for their program. Some require equity stake. Some require a combination of equity stake and a payment. Some will make investments like accelerators, like Techstars, in exchange for equity, and require you to still complete their program before they issue the letter of support. So there's various paths here. And the clear distinction, though, is with the VC funds and angel investors, their business is investment. That's all they do. They will make an investment in your company. Whereas if you are joining an incubator or accelerator, there's typically a lot more that's being offered in terms of helping you scale and grow your business and put some infrastructure around your business, but also help you through the actual startup visa process with connections to immigration lawyers like Pavan, legal experts for incorporation, tax experts for tax management and whatnot. So in terms of company requirements, it is up to 5 founders, but each must own a minimum of 10% of the new Canadian company. Collectively, you must own more than 50% of the new Canadian company. This demonstrates that the people that are coming through are actual founders of the business and not just employees. They also have a history with the company and are not just brand new people brought on just for the sake of startup visa, but also collectively by owning more than 50%, you show that this group controls the company as actually the mind and management of the business. And the Canadian company must either own the IP or demonstrate that the management has direct control over the IP. And so for a lot of companies that have existing businesses, have operations in other countries, IP control and management does become a challenge. We as Launch Academy in our Maple program connect you with lawyers and accountants to really help you through that process to make sure that's structured. If you're at the early stages, ideation, a lot of this doesn't matter because it's all brand new and there's a clean slate to work with. But for some of the companies that are further along, these are things to keep in mind. Immigration requirements, each co-founder must meet the IELTS level 5, as Pavan described in the express entry. It's a level 6. It is a little bit lower for a startup visa. It's a level 5. You do need to meet immigration requirements, such as funds and some of the regular things like criminality, security, health, financial. So just because you get approved by a designated entity to come through on startup visa does not mean that you do not have to meet all the other traditional immigration requirements. You do need to make sure that you meet those needs. And again, with our Maple program, we connect you with experts like Pavan to walk you through what those requirements look like to make sure that you qualify before you start spending money, but more importantly, time doing something that's not going to work for you. So again, just going back to launch, we are a full service incubator. We're connected to investors and events. We have our Maple program and Liberty program that are our primary business incubation programs for international entrepreneurs. Our Startup Express program is specifically designed for people on H-1Bs that are highly skilled, that have entrepreneurial visions, or even have a company that they've started that are ready to move off of their H-1Bs and work on their company full-time in Canada through the startup visa program with the work permits within 4 to 8 weeks, and then ultimately receiving the PR within 12 months. And Launchpad program is our incubation program for domestic companies. And then we also have education programs for early stage companies as well. And so all these programs, the Maple program, the Liberty program, it's more than just immigration. It's tactics, strategies, IP, taxes, foundation, and immigration. So it's really diving into building a strong foundation for your business, not just trying to help you get a permanent residency in Canada. So just a quick high-level overview. Maple program requirements is that the product's already in market. The company is financially stable. You've either raised funds or have revenues, and you really focus on the expansion of an existing business into North America. The program has 5 phases over 18 to 24 months, and it's an online application with fees starting at $28,000, and it's paid per phase over the course of 24 months. And so the Maple program is really designed for the companies that are ready to expand and grow, whereas our Liberty program is designed for the earlier stage entrepreneurs. So this is for the ones that have an idea or they've got a product that's still in development but not released yet. We still require you to be financially stable. Either you've raised funds or self-finance. Obviously, at this early stage, you don't have revenues. The reason being is, again, we're a nonprofit. We're charging fees for our programs. In both cases, the Maple and Liberty, we don't want to see our entrepreneurs in financial hardship. And so as long as you have the financial stability to be here, we want to help you achieve your dreams. But the last thing we want to do is put you in compromising positions and see you struggle when you get here. Again, 5 phases over 24 months. The fee is a little bit higher because there's a little more work involved. But this program, unlike the other, is invite only. And so we do need recommendations from people like Pavan or other of our channel partners to recommend you into our program. And when I say 5 phases, phase 1 is typically 1 month. So it's all free to apply. We don't charge any fees for you to apply. You go through our vetting process. We do a little bit of due diligence. We do interviews. But more importantly, we put your companies in front of a panel of judges, and the judges will help us determine who gets accepted into our programs. And also caveat is this is Launch Academy's programs. Other designated incubators and accelerators have different programs. You're more than welcome to do your homework and check to see which incubator, accelerator, or investor is the best fit for you. But what we're talking about here are the programs for launch. And so phase 1 webinars, all done online while you're in your home country or in the US. You don't have to be in Canada for this. Here, what we're going to do is connect you with immigration experts. We're connecting you with legal experts, accounting experts, to really to decide and determine, are you really prepared for what this is, what's required of your company and your team to move forward on this. If you decide, yes, you want to move forward, then you move into phase 2. Phase 2 is where you're really focusing on incorporating your company in Canada, getting all your paperwork and documentation in place for your immigration. As Pavan alluded to, IRCC is very strict when it comes to paperwork. So any errors basically results in a disqualification. And even in startup visa, it's a little bit more strict because any one person gets disqualified, everybody gets disqualified. So if you do have 5 founders, plus spouses, plus children, if one of the founders' children's documents aren't done properly, guess what? It could have a ripple effect across everybody's applications. And so we make sure that you're working with competent people that can help you sort through this. And then most importantly, you're building your roadmap. And the roadmap is where you're helping us as Launch Academy understand where your opportunities are, where your challenges are, what you plan to execute on when you come to Canada, so that we know how we can help you and what type of resources we can bring in to support you and help you be successful. Phase 3 is what we call pre-arrival. This is that waiting period from when you have applied for your permanent resident or your work permits to when you actually receive them when you arrive to Canada. And in this phase, we have a variety of different other programs that you can access, fundraising guides and reviews of your pitch deck and all these other things. We also have support programs for your spouses and children. And so a lot of times our founders are married to successful entrepreneurs or professionals in their own right. And as they're coming to Canada, they need support and help. So whether it's understanding what you need to do to qualify for legal qualifications or accounting designations in Canada to practice your business, we can help you through that. Phase 4 is landing pad. That's when you actually come to Canada. You're working in our incubator for 4 months. During this time, we're helping you execute against your roadmap, but we're also helping you do all the different things that you might not think you had to do when you come to Canada, like getting your health insurance and getting your social insurance numbers, some guidance around if you're getting your kids into daycare or school, but also getting you set up with other mentors, advisors, industry associations, and things that are really there to help you as an entrepreneur more so than your business. And then phase 4 is when you're going to apply for your permanent residency. Once you've applied, it does take about 12 months for that processing. Phase 5 is basically 12 months of support, access to resources, access to mentors and other things while you're waiting for your permanent residency. And like I said, cost, we do not take equity, but there are program fees. You do have to expect additional costs like you would in any market when you're moving your business or starting a new business: incorporation fees, accounting fees, immigration fees, travel accommodations, and living expenses. But like I said, this is something that you would incur no matter where you go in the world, whether it's London, Singapore, Toronto, New York, Vancouver. You're going to incur these expenses. But as you can see from the picture on the right there is this trade-off. You want to spend that money here in Vancouver because of the beauty, like clean air, clean water, good environment, good stable government. There's so many different pluses to why you want to build your business in Vancouver. But more importantly, it's why Canada. It's a good pulse of the global market, close proximity to the U.S., a lot of favorable business arrangements to allow you to do business in the U.S. very quickly and easily and efficiently, strong government support, good quality of life. And we're going a little bit over time, 5 minutes over, but I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions people may have. But here is my contact information, and we do have a follow-up email going out. So if we don't have time to answer your questions today, there's definitely an opportunity for you to follow up directly and ask us questions via email. And I say we, it's both myself and Pavan, respectively.
All right. Thanks, Ray. So I can read out some of these questions, and the best person to answer, either Pavan or Ray, would you guys just mind chiming in? So if someone doesn't have work experience, how will that impact their points?
So for express entry, if you have not yet, if for instance, you don't have any work experience, then most likely you won't qualify for one of the underlying programs, especially if you don't have Canadian work experience, which is obviously another form of experience. So some experience is definitely an important part of many of Canada's economic immigration programs. But after that, once you have that 1 year of work experience, for instance, under the Federal Skilled Worker Program, then you're looking at the number of years additional to that. That will really depend on the rest of your applicant profile.
Okay. Can you elaborate about police verification requirements?
Sure. So most of the, I would say it's really important also to look at which immigration program you're looking at. But most of the time it's any country that you've lived in for at least 6 months in the past, since turning 18 or in the past 10 years. That's a general requirement. I'm going to, in the chat, in the response, also put a link to the express entry police clearance certificate requirements.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I'm just filtering out some specific ones because so this is regarding startup visa. How is the product idea protected from IP theft perspective?
If you're talking about how do you protect your IP from theft from the investor or the incubator, well, that's again, for us, we work with companies that already have products and markets. If you are not able to trust the group that you're working with, then chances are they're never going to issue a letter of support to begin with. In terms of other IP protection, it's just like any other tech company. It's the first one to market. You have global protections on IP and whatnot. So I kind of don't really know where this question's going, but if you're afraid to share your idea with somebody and you think they're going to steal your idea, then you're way too early for this type of program.
Mm-hmm. This is more specific to launch. Does my CTO have to be a co-founder to be accepted, or can he be hired to benefit from the program?
So if your CTO is a co-founder, then he qualifies or she qualifies for the startup visa. If they're not a shareholder of the company, then you can look at something like the global talent stream, where you can do an intercompany transfer of the CTO into your Canadian company. And if there is no intercompany transfer, you can look at hiring them through the global talent stream, or even if they have the qualifications, they might qualify for express entry. And that might actually have them getting their permanent residency even before you, because express entry is 6 months. Startup visa is up to 12 months. The difference being is express entry is on a singular individual basis, whereas startup visa is for a group.
Okay, so is it possible to apply for express entry and the startup visa at the same time?
If it's for yourself, I would recommend against that, just because they're two different processes and two different strategies of why you do that. For startup visa, you need the support of a designated entity, designated organization, or investor. And so if you're going down that path, you're building a relationship with them to help you grow your business. If your objective is just to get permanent residency as quickly as possible, and you don't need all that support, then yes, look at express entry if you qualify. But like I said just earlier, if it is a group, you have to be mindful that if you're the CTO of a 3-man team or 3-woman team, and you qualify for express entry, and you're hoping that the other 2 can just do startup visa, well, you have to make sure that they still qualify for startup visa in terms of the ownership. So do those 2 without the CTO still own more than 50% of the company? Do they have at least minimum 10% each? If they don't start meeting those requirements, then guess what? You have applied for express entry, but you've now inadvertently disqualified the rest of the team from startup visa. So you do have to look at this holistically of what is the best path for everybody, but also on an individual basis.
This next question is regarding actual travel to Canada. So we've heard that the startup visa program doesn't require the entrepreneur to travel to Canada before they receive or actually start their work before they receive the visa or their permanent residency, I guess in this case. Is this true? Is Launch introducing a program? So I guess this is referring to if you are applying for your PR, do you need to actually come to Canada?
So in terms of Launch Academy's programs, the answer is yes, you do need to come to Canada before you apply for PR. Now, other organizations have different structures of how they run their programs. For us, we do phase 1 and phase 2 virtually online while you're in your home country, all with the intent of making sure that A, you know what you're getting yourself into and you're prepared, but B, you're spending your money, but more importantly, your time executing against expansion and growth of your business and getting everything done properly upfront with incorporating your company, getting structures in place, getting all your documentation in place for your immigration, getting your roadmap so that you're prepared for entry into Canada and hitting the ground running before you actually get your letter of support. Once we review all that information and documentation, we know everything's correct. That's when we'll give you the letter of support, and that's when you will apply for your work permits. Once you have your work permits, you then come to Canada. We usually do a start date in January, May, or September for a 4-month cohort. And during that 4 months, you're executing against your roadmap and building your business. And during that time, that's when you apply for your permanent residency. Some groups, other organizations may allow you to apply for your PR earlier. That's not the case with us because, as I said at the beginning, we're all about the business incubation, and that's the model that we have in place, and that's been very successful for us. And that's kind of where we like to stay within those realms. But like I said, there are other organizations that do have different strategies in place that may allow you to apply for your PR before you come to Canada. I know that's usually the case with the VC or the angel investors. They typically don't care any which way.
Okay. So this is specific to launch. What percentage of the 85 companies you've supported have been accepted or failed? So this is probably more towards the PR route.
Yeah, so we have a 100% success rate. Every company that we work with, like I said, we have a structured program, a structured process. We have great partners that know what they're doing, like Pavan, when it comes to getting all your documentation in place. The only time we've ever had problems is when the entrepreneurs have tried to do it on their own. And in those 3 or 4 cases, they were rejected. But when they came back to work with us and our partners, they got accepted. And so the success rate of the 85, a lot of them have come through. I think we're at 30 are now have already received their permanent residency, but like, as I said, there is a time difference, but 85 are at some point in the process on their way to Canada. And again, all successful.
Perfect. The next few questions are about program fees. So regarding the actual cost breakdown, the fact that we have USD dollars instead of Canadian, and other factors that might affect the program fee cost. So can you just quickly discuss the program fees, when people can expect to pay, and so on?
Yeah, for us, we do break up the fees per phase. And so phase 1 is 4,000 Canadian or 4,000 US, roughly 5,000 Canadian. We will obviously have a conversation with the team to see, do they want to be billed in US? Do they want to be billed in Canadian, and adjust that accordingly? But it's not all up front. It's all done per phase. Phase 2 is another 4,000. Phase 1 usually takes about 1 month. Maybe a little bit longer. Phase 2 can take anywhere from 2 months to 6 months. But again, you're paying just 4,000 for that phase until you're done your work, and then you move into phase 3. Phase 3 is optional. We've got a variety of different courses and programs and resources that you can take advantage of while you're waiting for your work permits. And then phase 4 is 4,000 per month for 4 months. And then phase 5 is another 4,000 for the 12 months. And so it's not as easy to say, oh, you're going to pay 28,000 all up front. It's all done in phases while you're doing certain work. In our follow-up email, you're going to receive the full program guide for our Maple program that breaks down all the different phases, what we do in each phase, and what the cost is for your phase. But you do have to remember that there are additional fees. You do have to pay Pavan her fees for doing your paperwork, and that may change based off of how many team members you are, and there are some baseline fees, but there could be additional fees if there are additional challenges. And so we can't outright say here's a flat fee that you're going to pay. It does go up and down.
Okay. And when does Launch typically issue letters of support, prior to or after phase 1?
After phase 1. So letter of support will be near the end of phase 2. So phase 2 is when you're going to incorporate your company, make sure you have the proper legal setup. So some of our companies have Delaware companies already set up because they've raised money in the US. Some of them have a company in India or Venezuela where IP becomes an issue and they need to make sure the Canadian company is structured properly. But one of the other things is we want to make sure you do it properly, because when you are in Canada and you want to take advantage of Canadian programs like Global Talent Stream or our tax credit programs or university grants, you need to make sure your Canadian company is structured properly to take advantage of those. And that's why we make sure we spend time with you at the beginning of phase 2 to make sure that's done properly. All your work permits are going to be done in the name of your Canadian company. And so you need to make sure that all the paperwork and documentation that you're doing afterwards references that company. And so, as you can see, there is a methodical reason why we structured the program the way it is. Once we reviewed your roadmap, the immigration Pavan tells us, yes, I'm ready to file. That's when we prepare the letter of support, because the letter of support does have an expiry date. It's a 6-month support letter. And so we want to make sure we maximize your time on that letter by making sure that we issue you to the last moment possible, and then you apply for your work permits.
Okay. Is there an age limit? There's a couple questions around age and experience. For people asking specific questions about their particular experience, please follow up with us in our email that we send out. But in general, is there an age limit to apply for express entry or to get PR into Canada?
There's no age limit, but under express entry, you stop obtaining points after 45, after the age of 45. And at that point, you're really going to need to supplement your points, most likely, with one of the alternatives we discussed. Or you can look at other potential options like the startup visa or provincial nominee programs, some of which will require a job offer. So not a bar.
I would correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're under 35, the express entry really gives you additional bonus points for being under 35, correct?
Yeah, so basically the younger you are, if from 30 points onward to 45, your points start decreasing after by 5. So it's not really that you get bonus points, but the reality is that if you're younger, you have way more points than if you're older.
So you get diminishing points the older you get.
Exactly. But as I always say, we have so many people that reach out to us that are in their late 30s or in their 40s that have all this amazing experience. I know I saw somebody that had like 18 years of experience, but they're over 45. That doesn't mean that you don't qualify. It just means that you're going to have to supplement your score. And remember, we're looking at one of the few programs in the world that doesn't require you to have a job offer. So you really want to look at starting a business through like using the startup visa. There's so many different pathways that are available. It's just a matter of figuring out, that's where the strategy really comes in.
Perfect. We have a question about the requirements for angel investors. So I'm not sure how fast you guys can answer this, but the question is, what are the requirements for angel investors? Is it any Canadian citizens, or are there more requirements to be an investor of 70,000 plus?
Yeah, so they have to be a designated angel investor. So either the individual or the angel group has to have already applied to Immigration Canada to be recognized as a designated provider for the startup visa program. So it can't just be anybody. They have to have already been pre-vetted and approved by NACO, which is the National Angel Capital Association. They will approve or recommend who they think IRCC needs to approve. So there is a process. It can't just be anybody. There is a list online that you can find, designated organizations on our website, link to that list as well, that shows you all the VCs, all the angels, and all the designated organizations, or incubators, accelerators that are authorized.
Perfect. This is specific to launch, I believe. Do you accept companies with 1 million plus turnover per year, or any size of company can apply?
Any size. Like I said, we do work with some companies that are still in prototype and pre-revenue. We work with companies that are post-revenue. We've got companies that are global businesses that have already raised $35 million Series A. We've got cybersecurity companies that have offices all over the world. We've got Y Combinator grads. So it's a wide spectrum of type of companies that we work with. For us, it's really about the entrepreneurs.
This also has to do with launch, but also startup visa in general. Can a solo founder apply and successfully get into the startup visa program, or does it need to be co-founders or a larger company?
No, it definitely can be a solo founder. We've got entrepreneurs that are just single solo founders, not even married, no kids, just on their own, trying to come through and building great businesses. We support them. Other spectrum is 5 founders, each with a spouse, 3, 4 kids each. So it's like bringing a group of 20, 30 people into the country off of one application. That's the other thing with our fees at Launch Academy. It's one fee to the company. We don't charge per individual. Now, definitely there are some scaling fees when you talk about immigration applications or hotel, travel, accommodation, all those things scale up with the number of people. But when it comes to the program fee, it's just one fee to the company. And because it's a business expense, it is a write-off for you as well.
Perfect. There's just a few more questions left. So this is in regards to launch and admissions of specific companies, industries, things like that. So is the startup visa program for launch limited to tech or IT, or other streams also considered? Example, media, food, hospitality. Another person had asked if we support hotel apps. So yeah, what's our launch's specific requirements?
Yeah, so again, from a launch perspective, we're here to help entrepreneurs. We want to build great businesses. And so we want to support you the best way that we can. And that unfortunately does mean that we're not able to help certain types of companies. Like if you're trying to build a restaurant or any type of brick and mortar business that doesn't qualify for us, we have to really focus in on emerging technologies, blockchain, cybersecurity, quantum, AI, VR, AR, health tech, fintech, ag tech, anything that has a level of technology and innovation to it is the ones that we feel most comfortable working with.
Right, that includes people who have apps, right? That like, for instance, so I know I've had a few people reach out that have asked me that exact question. So I always tell them, like, if there's a technology element.
Yeah, and again, we look at the entrepreneurs and what they're doing and the vision of the company. If it's somebody that's coming in just to build a Shopify store that's reselling backpacks that they found in Indonesia, no, that's not really innovative enough for us to want to work with, because we bring in mentors, we bring in investors, like we have a whole network that we bring around to work with these companies. And so it has to be something that is going to be beneficial for them to work with, but also for you to take advantage of the resources that we're bringing to the table.
Perfect. So the last 2 questions sort of have to do with each other in a way. This is for launch specifically for acceptance into the program. Is there a specific type of traction or business roadmap that you need to be at for success, users, revenues, things like that? Can you be like, what size of business are you looking for? What's the ideal sort of applicant?
Yeah, so for us, it is case by case. So we do have an online application that you're going to fill in. There's different metrics that you put in there, but our team doesn't just disqualify somebody because they don't have the numbers that we're looking for. We try to look at what is the vision of the business, what is the IP that's being built, who are the people behind it, what's their level of education, expertise, experience. So a lot of different factors that go into it. At the end of the day, we work with companies from all different backgrounds, all different stages. So the best thing to do is just apply. It's free to apply. Get your application in there. Our team will review it. If it gets rejected, you can always apply again. There's no limit of how many times you can apply.
Perfect. So that wraps up all of the questions. Again, we're going to be sending out a follow-up email to everyone who has signed up for this webinar. So if you have any other questions that we haven't answered, or they're pretty specific to yourself in your case, we'll try to help you as much as possible. Please send those in reply to the email that's going to be coming out to you soon. Any final closing remarks, Ray or Pavan?
There's just one last question that just came in about the other program. So Maple is the program that's available on our website. That one's free to apply. And again, that's typically for companies that already have a product in market, that already released, have already raised money or have revenue. We do have a Liberty program. A Liberty program is for earlier stage companies, for individuals that are on H-1Bs that want to make a transition. This one's invite only. So if you do have interest in that program, I would recommend that you reach out to Pavan, get her insight into your current situation, your personal situation, and if she feels you're qualified for Liberty, she'll make a recommendation to us to look at your application.
Perfect. All right, that concludes today's session. Thank you everyone for attending. And again, look out in your inbox for the follow-up email from us. Thanks,
Awesome.
Ray and
Thanks,
Pavan.
everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks, Pavan.
Bye.